Hey, edibles lovers. Before we get started with today's show, I just wanted to share a game changer in my kitchen, the Levo 2 infusion device. If you're serious about making your own edibles, you're going to want to hear this. I've been using the Levo 2 for my infusions, and it makes the process so easy and mess-free. Whether you're infusing oil, butter, honey, even milk, the Levo 2 handles it all. Plus, it takes care of decarbing your cannabis right in the machine. No need for extra steps or guesswork. Just perfect infusions every time. One of my favorite things is customizable. You can set your own time and temperature, which means you get the exact potency you want without any hassle. And the best part, cleanup is a breeze. Just pop the parts into the dishwasher when you're done. No mess, no stress. So if you're looking to level up your edibles making game, the Levo 2 is the way to go. And because you're a Bite Me listener, I've got a little something for you. Head over to levooil.com and use the code BITEME at checkout for a special discount on your Levo 2 today. You'll wonder how you ever made edibles without it. Welcome, friends, to episode 272. This is a Halloween-themed episode for you today. Stay tuned. Welcome to Bite Me, the show about edibles, where I help you take control of your high life. I'm your host and certified ganger, Margaret, and I love helping cooks make safe and effective edibles at home. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome, friends, to a special spooky Halloween edition of Bite Me. I thought I would do something a little bit different today. I could have done a Halloween-themed edible, but I think those are so easy to find out there. But I will share an episode that I did before called Monster Mash. I'll include that in the show notes, and that was a delicious Halloween-themed trail mix that was put out by Magical Butter Machine. They were the ones that did this recipe, and it was really good. And it includes things like popcorn, pretzels, chocolate chips, and then you have your infused coconut oil, white chocolate chips. I do remember it being very, very good. But instead, I thought I would do something different. I've probably mentioned this before on the show. When my kids were little, one of the favorite things that I loved to do was read to them. And as someone who reads a lot myself, naturally, I was hoping that my children would also develop a joy of reading. And luckily, they have. One of them does read more than the other, but one of them also works a hell of a lot more too. So I understand that sometimes people don't have time to spend reading a lot, but it is still something that I love and attempt to make part of my daily routine. And when they were young, however, one of the books that I read to them was the Puffin book of 20th century children's verse, because I tried to read to them all kinds of things. I read a lot of the classics. I read new stuff. I read Winnie the Pooh, like what childhood is complete without Winnie the Pooh? And I read to them, of course, poems, because I thought there's actually a lot of really great poets out there. And this particular book was a compilation of many well-known poets. One of the poems that they loved in this book, however, was a spooky poem called The Visitor. And I'd love to read it to them, but it was definitely a favorite. And they still remember this poem to this day. Now, they couldn't recite it, of course, but they remember the feeling that they got when I read this poem to them. So I'm going to read it to you now, and then I have something else special for you, too. Now, this poem is called The Visitor, and it's by Ian Sorellier. I'm sure my accent was not proper, but I did my best. The Visitor. A crumbling churchyard, the sea and the moon, the waves had gouged out grave and bone. A man was walking, late and alone. He saw a skeleton on the ground. A ring on a bony finger he found. He ran home to his wife and gave her the ring. "Oh, where did you get?" He said not a thing. "It's the loveliest ring in the world," she said, as it glowed on her finger. They slipped off to bed. At midnight they woke. In the dark outside, "Give me my ring," a chill voice cried. "What was that, William? What did it say?" "Don't worry, my dear, it'll soon go away. I'm coming. A skeleton opened the door. Give me my ring. It was crossing the floor. What was that, William? What did it say? Don't worry, dear. It'll soon go away. I'm reaching you now. I'm climbing the bed. The wife pulled the sheet right over her head. It was torn from her grasp and tossed in the air. I'll drag you out of bed by the hair. What was that, William? What did it say? Throw the ring through the window. Throw it away. She threw it. The skeleton leapt up from the sill, scooped up the ring, and clattered downhill. Fainter and fainter. Then all was still. And that was The Visitor by Ian Sorellier. Now, the next thing I wanted to share with you, because this was a Halloween special, and sadly, Halloween this year will be a little bit different for me because I have moved in with my dad, as most of you know, and that's been really lovely, but my dad has not had a single trick-or-treater at his house in probably 30 years. And I happened to be away the weekend before Halloween. So there's some Halloween parties and stuff that I could have been going to were I around, but sadly I won't be this year. However, I am looking forward to the weekend that I'm going to have away. So, pros and cons. So the Halloween might be a little bit different this year because, of course, as I've mentioned many times before, I have young adult children and they're not trick-or-treating either. So Halloween, it doesn't really have the same je ne sais quoi anymore. So I have to live vicariously through people that I know that have younger children. And in some respects, it's good because I don't have to buy Halloween candy and then fight off the urge to eat it all. Because as I've said also many times in this podcast, part of the reason why I like to infuse my sweets is because then I can't eat too many, because we all know what happens if you do that. You turn yourself into a panic attacking basket case and you have to ride that out for 5 hours. And I've done that to myself more than once. And it's not something that I hope to repeat ever again, at least not on purpose. But what I thought would be interesting is I do use AI quite often. It's great for brainstorming ideas and fleshing out ideas, doing some basic writing. I always find I have to edit things when I'm using ChatGPT. I edit a lot. There's nothing that really comes out of it raw that I'm going to use elsewhere that I find meets my standard, but it has its uses for sure. And one of the uses sometimes is storytelling. I asked ChatGPT to write me a spooky Halloween themed story about Bite Me, the show about edibles. However, I haven't actually read the story yet because I thought it would be more fun and interesting if we heard it for the first time together. And so I'm going to share it with you now. And I have no idea what to expect. I haven't read it yet. So I'm pretty curious about what it came up with. So let's find out together. This story is entitled The Haunted Edibles of Bite Me, the show about edibles. It was a dark and stormy night. The kind of night where the wind howled like a coyote on the hunt and the moon glowed eerily in the sky, half hidden behind jagged clouds. Margaret, the ever-determined host of Bite Me, the show about edibles, sat at her kitchen table stirring the final batch for Halloween-themed edibles. As a lover of spooky things and community gatherings, she had promised her listeners a very special, very haunted episode to celebrate the season. This episode was going to be legendary, filled with ghost stories, eerie recipes, and tales of cannabis-infused mischief. But little did she know, her edible adventure was about to take a turn for the supernatural. Margaret had always prided herself on creating a warm, welcoming space for her listeners, a place where they could learn, have fun, and most importantly, find community. Her loyal listeners felt more like family, tuning in religiously, sharing recipes, and even swapping stories of their own cannabis-fueled kitchen victories and disasters. As the autumn leaves fell, excitement buzzed through her podcast community. They were all eagerly awaiting Margaret's Halloween special, which she had promised would be a spooktacular, a word she could only use once a year without feeling guilty. As she finished making a batch of cannabis-infused pumpkin spice cookies, her secret ingredient, a pinch of ghost pepper for an extra kick, A strange chill ran down her spine. Margaret paused, a spoon in hand, and glanced around the kitchen. The air suddenly felt thick, almost electric. She laughed it off, attributing it to the brisk Ontario fall creeping in through her windows. But when she looked down at the dough, it began to glow faintly. Okay, I definitely didn't add glow-in-the-dark sugar, Margaret muttered to herself. A knock sounded at the door, echoing through her cozy, autumn-decorated house. Margaret hesitated. It was well past midnight, and no one ever visited at this hour. She peered out the window, half expecting to see some kids pulling a Halloween prank. Instead, there stood a figure, draped in a cloak with a hat pulled low over their eyes. Just some trick-or-treater, Margaret reassured herself, though it was way too late for that. She wiped her hands in her apron and opened the door cautiously. "Hello?" she called. The cloaked figure didn't speak at first. They simply extended a hand holding what looked like a vintage recipe card. Margaret hesitated, but took it. "For you," the figure said in a low, whispery voice before turning on their heel and disappearing into the misty night. Margaret looked at the card. It was old, really old. The edges were browned and curling and had been passed down through generations. The writing, an elegant calligraphy, read, "The ultimate haunted edible. Prepare with caution." Beneath it, an old-fashioned recipe for cannabis-infused toffee apples, but with a twist. "Beware the matriarch's hand." What does that even mean? Margaret mused, setting the card on the table. She shook her head, dismissing it as a clever Halloween prank. Still, curiosity got the best of her. She loved a good mystery, and her listeners would eat this up, literally and figuratively. She decided to make the toffee apples and feature them on her show as a fun Halloween surprise. But as she gathered the ingredients and followed the recipe, strange things began to happen. The wind outside grew louder. The house creaked ominously, and every so often a strange shadow flitted by the window. Just my imagination, Margaret whispered to herself. Or maybe it's the sativa kicking in. As the apples began to boil in the golden toffee, a sweet, eerie smell filled the kitchen. It was inviting, but there was something about it, something ancient and powerful. The kind of smell that made you feel like you were conjuring up something far more potent than an edible. When the apples were done, gleaming and delicious, Margaret set them on a plate. She snapped a picture for the Bite Me Cannabis Club, posting it with the caption, "The ultimate haunted edible. Are you brave enough to try one?" Her phone pinged almost instantly with excited replies from her loyal listeners. Within minutes, the post blew up. Everybody was talking about the mysterious recipe, begging her to bring it up in the upcoming Halloween episode. Smiling, Margaret decided to test her creation. She took a bite, expecting a rush of sweet, sticky toffee and the mild bitterness of cannabis. But as the flavor hit her tongue, the room spun, the kitchen lights flickered, and suddenly she wasn't alone. The faint whispers of voices filled the air. Margaret looked around wildly, heart racing. There, in her kitchen, stood women, generations of women. Their forms were transparent, their faces kind yet stern, each one holding a dish, a spoon, or a rolling pin. "We are the matriarchs of the kitchen," one of them said, her voice rich with authority, "and we've come to remind you of the power you wield." Margaret blinked, unsure if she was dreaming or if she'd truly crossed into some culinary dimension of the afterlife. Power? "Yes," said another ghostly woman, this one with a knowing smile. "You've always felt it, haven't you? The connection between the kitchen, the community, and the magic of cannabis." Margaret nodded slowly. There was something magical about bringing people together over food and cannabis. It wasn't just the edibles. It was the stories, the laughter, the bonds formed over shared experiences. And now it seemed like that bond ran deeper than she ever realized. "That recipe you've made is no ordinary edible," said the first matriarch, stepping closer. It's a reminder that we women who come before have passed down more than ingredients. We've passed down wisdom, strength, and community. You are the latest in a long line of matriarchs. Margaret, normally quick with a witty retort, was speechless. The matriarchs seemed to glow with a pride as they gathered around her. We've been watching, another said. You've built something special, a community where people come together not just to enjoy edibles, but to find connection. You are leading the way. Feeling a surge of warmth and confidence, Margaret smiled. I guess I am. The ghosts of the matriarchs past faded into the night, leaving Margaret alone in her kitchen once more. But she no longer felt alone. She felt the strength of generations behind her, guiding her. The next morning, Margaret recorded her Halloween episode, sharing the tale of the matriarchs of the kitchen with her listeners. And though they laughed at the spooky story, Margaret knew the real truth. The power of community, especially a community led by strong women, was the greatest magic of all. As her listeners tuned in and prepared their own haunted edibles, a sense of connection wove through the Bite Me Cannabis Club, one that would last long after the Halloween decorations came down. And from then on, every batch of edibles Margaret made had just a little extra magic. The end. Well, ChatGPT, you did not disappoint. I'm really impressed by that story. I'm not going to lie. It was, it's going to make me think a little bit more every time I create an edible. And it ended up being an interesting call to action. If you haven't yet joined the Bite Me Cannabis Club, there is still time. I'm doing a lot of fun things over there. I'm trying to really ramp things up. I think you should join us over there. The whole purpose of the Bite Me Cannabis Club is to bring together the people that are part of Bite Me, the show about edibles, and who want to find that community and connection. In large part, it was for me as well. I often feel like when I'm podcasting, it's a very solitary pursuit. You are recording alone, talking to yourself, reading stories about yourself to people, I shouldn't say imaginary listeners. I know people are out there listening, but it doesn't always feel that way because you're in a room by yourself recording. Bite Me Cannabis Club is for cannabis lovers to learn, connect, and create together, and that's why I created it. I hope you do have a wonderful Halloween and enjoy many delicious edibles. Perhaps you'll try the Monster Mash if you're looking for something Halloween themed. Have a spooky Halloween, my friends. I'm your host, Margaret. Until next time, stay hot. Hey friends, it's Margaret from Bite Me, and I have a question for you. Are you tired of playing a guessing game every time you indulge in edibles? We've all been there, taking a bite of a brownie or a gummy and waiting for the effects to kick in, only to learn that they weren't strong enough, or worse, they were way too strong. What if I told you there's a solution that can help you take control of your edibles experience? Meet the Bite Me Edibles Journal, your new best friend when it comes to customizing and tracking your edibles. With this journal, you can figure out your tolerance, experiment with different doses, experiences, and record all the important details in one place. But the Bite Me Edibles Journal isn't just for homemade edibles. It's also a great tool for keeping track of store-bought ones, so you can compare different brands, flavors, and potencies and make informed decisions based on your past experiences. Think of the Bite Me Edibles Journal as your personal diary of deliciousness, a way to document your journey to finding the optimal combination of factors that results in the best outcome. Whether you're a seasoned edibles enthusiast or you're just getting started, this journal is perfect for you. So don't wait. Head over to Amazon and add the Bite Me Edibles Journal to your cart now and take control of your high life. It's also now available in a pocket-sized edition.